Sure. Well, the panel that I participated in was about communications and behavioral science and social change. So for example, like how do you get information out to people about health or making better financial choices and things like that. So what I did was I shared my experiences on the 2 Obama campaigns and how we developed tools that we could go out and communicate with people in kind of culturally appropriate ways so that you can really get your message through to your target demographic. Because for example, the way you would reach out to an 18-year-old who lives in the city as opposed to an older couple who lives in a more rural area are going to be very different. You probably use social media for the 18-year-old, and you might use the radio and television and newspapers for the older couple. So that's what I tried to share with people in the course of our session this morning. So soft power has to reflect the values of the leadership in the country. So it needs to be an honest extension of who the country is and the leadership thereof. Because what you want to do is soft power is really a way of making friends around the world, right? And being part of peacekeeping missions or getting nutrition out to parts of the world that doesn't have it, or helping countries that don't have an infrastructure for educating their youth and helping them do that. That's what soft power is. And the way it really works best is when it's a real commitment on behalf of the leadership of that country, and that it's a sustained commitment. It's something that leadership makes a commitment to do for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, because that's how you really see results of soft power and that leadership's capacity to really affect some change or even help other countries around the world. Absolutely, especially first off, to rally support internally. Because what you're really doing is you're exporting the values of a country, right? So for example, in America, like we believe that if everyone has access to education, that they'll be able to make better choices for themselves, and they'll be able to grow up and build a better life for themselves. And then as they grow a little bit older, they'll be able to provide a better life for their children and things like that. So a lot of the programs that the US supports and runs around the world are based on those kind of values. And that's what allows them to be effective, because they're long-term commitments. It's not just, let's just do this one thing this week and then a different thing next month and things like that. Well, I don't know enough to really answer that, to be perfectly honest. Having spent, like last night I was a guest of the Sharjah Art Foundation, where they brought people in from around the world. And it was amazing, and there was a lot of energy and creativity and passion. Those things to me speak to a real appetite for engaging people from around the world, and not only bringing them here, but reaching out across the world and extending the support of the Sharjah government to their artists so that they can go out and share the story of Sharjah and the UAE around the world. I wish I could give you a better answer, because I'm not really in a position to make a commentary about soft power in the UAE right now. So, well, we live in an age where anything that happens, at least in the industrialized world, is going to be picked up and broadcast around the world. So there's definitely a role for some responsibility. So for example, the New Zealand media, not using the individual's image, not using their name, things like that, trying to exercise some responsibility over how much do they play into the goal of the individual who committed an act like that, who obviously is trying to make some level of political statement. So I think, that's a very important role for the media, to report the news and make sure people are aware of things that happen in the world, but not do it in a way that takes the bad actors, and there's bad actors in every country in the world, obviously, and rewards them by elevating their status and turning them into some kind of celebrity or something like that. Well, that's interesting, because in the United States, a lot of people think that like the government started outsourcing jobs and everything, when in fact it was the marketplace. So maybe that's a great example of how different countries just have different cultures and things like that. The thing that happens, at least in the United States, is a company can pick up and move their factory to Mexico or Vietnam or something like that, and the people that mainly have to answer for that happening are the elected officials, when in fact it was people in a boardroom that decided to take those jobs and bring them to a part of the world where they would have lower labor costs. So it's interesting that you frame it that way, but in the United States, it's definitely the elected officials who end up answering for a lot of the decisions that are made by the private sector leaders.